Welcome to the very first episode of Around the World. This is a basketball podcast, primarily discussing NBA, but really just any basketball topic around the world, hence the name. Today, we are going to be discussing off seasons around the NBA. However, I would like to start each episode with what I'm going to call the community question. Every single episode will start with me asking you guys a question. Could be a detailed question about the NBA, about basketball itself, about concepts, plays, or any of the teams around the league. But for now, I want to discuss just a simple, nice question. Who is your guys' favorite player of all time? For me, it is Russell Westbrook. It's not even close. I remember growing up watching him on the nationally televised games, wearing those white OKC shirt jerseys. I still love him to this day. We'll get into him, actually, and the Denver Nuggets later on in this video. But let me know who your guys' favorite NBA player of all time is. If you don't have an all-time one, let me know it current. If you really just like basketball, but you don't really have a favorite player, let me know your favorite athlete of all time. Start discussion in the comments. I'd love to hear who you guys think is your favorite. Now, that is a community question for today, but the main topic, the meat of the video, is going to be discussing the offseason of every single NBA team, all 30 NBA teams. I'm ranking it not 1 to 30, but in different tiers. So I will explain every tier as we get there, but we have nothing, bad, fine, good, and elite. I will explain the differences between teams that maybe could have been elite, but ended up in good, could have been fine, ended up in bad, could have been bad, ended up in nothing. I'll explain exactly what I mean for every single group and every single team along the way. We are going to start from the bottom all the way to the top. First two teams we have here, we have two teams in the group nothing. We have the Memphis Grizzlies and the Houston Rockets. Starting first with the Memphis Grizzlies. I said that they did nothing simply because their main move of the offseason was a draft pick. You can figure out that the Rockets are pretty similar to that as well. They added Zach Edey and Cam Spencer, Jalen Wells. That is their draft. Everybody else who's on the team, pretty much just undrafted guys who aren't really going to see the floor. So I felt it really wasn't major moves. Same thing could go for the losses. They lost to Jordan Goodwin, Yuta Watanabe. Biggest loss probably Zaire Williams, I guess, but even then it's a trade. So what really can you get too mad at? Luke Kennard is the guy that they chose to resign. That is their only resigning so far. Now, I am aware that some of these guys could still be re-signed. There are still more moves to be made in the NBA offseason. The offseason is obviously not done yet. Teams like the Pelicans still might be shopping, a guy like Brandon Ingram. So there's still a potential major move to happen in the offseason. However, I just thought that it'd be a best idea to do it now because honestly, I don't think any major moves are going to happen from now until the start of the season on October 22nd. So I put them in nothing. If I really had to put them in a group that wasn't nothing, I think I'd put them in fine. They're going to be good going into next year. I have them on teams that I like, that I think are going to improve from last year. Pretty obvious. I think everybody has that with the return of John Morant, Desmond Bane back healthy. If they stay healthy, they'll be right at the top of the Western Conference like they were for the couple of seasons before all the stuff that happened last season with the suspensions, the injuries, and all that. But I think they're going to be a good team. I think they're going to be a solid team. They didn't make any wrong moves in the offseason, but they also didn't really make any right moves outside of Zach Edey. That was definitely a good pick, putting Jaren Jackson back at the 4, which I believe is where he won DPOY just a couple seasons ago. So they're going to be good this year. I put them in nothing because they really didn't do much anything to add to the team outside of the draft picks, which pretty much everybody has draft picks. Same can be said for the Houston Rockets, the second team on this list. Obviously, the main thing is going to be that they added Reed Sheppard. Obviously, that is by far the biggest move, and he is set to start a potential Rookie of the Year campaign. Only loss is Reggie Bullock and Boban. Both are still free agents, so technically they could be signed back. Again, this is why I say that the offseason isn't fully done yet. They added a couple undrafted guys, AJ Griffin and then Reed Sheppard. They also re-signed Aaron Holiday. That's probably the biggest name who got re-signed. All the other guys really aren't going to play too many minutes, hence why I put them in the nothing group. Same story here. I think they're going to be solid. I think they're going to improve. I really like that roster as a whole. Putting together Reed Sheppard on the bench, most likely with really solid guard play in Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. We're looking at an all-star center, very likely in Alfred Sengun, if they can stay healthy. You obviously have Jalen Green, sitting there. He was phenomenal in that incredible streak run that they went on towards the end of last season as they pushed towards the play-in. But yeah, they really didn't add much. I think they're going to be solid. They didn't make mistakes. They didn't really do anything. those are the two teams that I have in nothing. Now we get to times where you guys may agree or disagree with me. As always, I would like you guys to leave what you think in the comments. If you guys agree or disagree, I want to hear it. I'm more than open to hearing other opinions about the NBA or the game of basketball outside of my own, because it can be very naive to just be stuck in my bubble and, just think that, well, because I think the Rockets really didn't do anything, that they didn't do anything, when somebody could prove to me, well, this guy actually might be solid. So let me know what you guys think about anything. If you guys think a team in the elite group maybe should be even down all the way in fine, or a bad group should be in good, any sort of idea like that. That being said, let's get to those teams that I put in the bad group, starting with two teams who I said maybe could be put in the nothing group, but I will explain why I chose not to. First of those teams is probably the biggest team in the entire NBA, and that is the Los Angeles Lakers. I put them in bad because I felt like they needed to do things this offseason. Overall, they didn't really do anything. Bronny James, Dalton Connect, draft picks. That is basically it. Jordan Goodwin is probably the biggest name added. Biggest move of the offseason, however, obviously re-signing LeBron James. I think they were pretty happy to sign Max Christie as well, from what I've heard from Lakers fans online. So I don't think they had an awesome offseason, obviously. Now, do I think they're the worst offseason in the entire NBA? Absolutely not. But I think they once again are making the mistake. They've tried to go all in the last couple seasons, and it didn't work out. And I think they were right to go less all in, but LeBron was willing to take a pretty significant pay cut to bring in another guy with them, whereas they now appear to be looking to be building towards the future, which I can't blame the Lakers for that. However, if you're going to build towards the future, what's the point in even keeping LeBron? Obviously you want AD to be the number one option, but if you're going to keep LeBron while you build towards the future, you're probably just going to be stuck in that mediocre area again, where, you're looking at another year of being the play-in, maybe at best 5, 6 seed, because, teams like the Timberwolves, the Thunder, the Nuggets, they're going to be at the top of the West, right? Those guys are pretty solidified, barring an injury to Jokic, Shea, Ant. Those guys are going to be at the top of the conference and extremely difficult to beat come playoff time. Your goal is now just to get there, because the West is so stacked. The Suns, I believe, improved in the offseason as well. So there's another team that's going to continue to get better and better. It just makes it incredibly difficult for them to do anything. They lost Taurean Prince. I don't think an awful loss. It is 3-point shooting that they did lose. Lost Spencer Dinwiddie. I really don't care too much about that. You can see why I debated putting them in nothing, but I chose to put them in bad simply because they were supposed to do things. Their star player, their face of the franchise right now, wanted to do things and was willing to take a significant pay cut to do so, and they couldn't get anything done. I believe they mentioned they were in on DeMar DeRozan himself said that the Lakers were in on him and he was looking at it, and nothing came of it. So I put it in bad personally. I think you would be okay in saying that they had a fine offseason. If you went anything above good, that's where I think I'd really start to disagree. You could also put them in nothing as well. Other team that also I decided probably could be in nothing is the Toronto Raptors. Similar story here. I put them in bad rather than nothing because of what they did with the Immanuel Quickley contract specifically. So we'll get into the re-signing and the Immanuel Quickley later on. Let me mention everything that they added and lost in the offseason, or the main things. They lost Jalen McDaniels in a trade with the Sacramento Kings. I think he's going to be a completely okay player. Biggest loss of the offseason, pretty clearly Gary Trent Jr. He is going to be pretty solid, and I'm very happy that the Bucks picked him up. I think that was an awesome pickup for them. They then added Bruno Fernando, Davion Mitchell with that Jalen McDaniels trade, and then added Jamal Shed and Jacoby Walter in the draft as well. That's it. That is their entire offseason outside of players that they re-signed. Hence why I debated putting them in the nothing group. But the loss of Gary Trent, I think, was pretty significant. Significant enough to put them in bad. But the main reason, re-signing Scottie Barnes, awesome, well done. I personally did not like the Immanuel Quickley signing. I'm going to look up his contract right now as we speak, because I believe is it 200? It might be 200 million. I could be wrong. But we're looking at his cap hit next year is $32 million, $162 million. That's what it is, not 210. Apologies for that. I believe that's Franz Wagner's contract. But $32 million a year for the next 5 seasons. 5 seasons. He's going to be taking a $32.5 million cap hit. I don't like that. I really do not like that contract for the Toronto Raptors. you're looking at a team who's clearly rebuilding, and I think in the time of rebuilding, you need to take the prove it offers from players like what the Pistons did with Tobias Harris. You need to get guys that are ready to prove it, and then you can maybe then trade in the future. But a guy like Immanuel Quickley is a guy that teams I think would love, or a guy that I think teams would love to trade for. But now that his contract is so expensive, are teams going to be willing to do that for a potential six man or their second point guard? Things like that. I feel like it kind of puts them in a bind. They're kind of stuck for the next couple years. I really don't know how to feel about the Raptors right now. They are the new team that I think for the next couple years is just going to be stuck in mediocrity. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know the plan. I hope Scottie Barnes is able to stay there. That dude is absolutely incredible. But, I mean, a lot of these things, it's just like, what next? Where can they go now? So many, like Jacoby Walter, great draft pick. If Quickley doesn't hit, and he doesn't turn out to be a great point guard in this league, or if RJ Barrett maybe doesn't hit, or maybe if Scottie Barnes, we already have seen him at his peak now, and he's not going to get any better, which I think is highly, highly unlikely. I think he's going to get significantly better than what he already is. Where do they go? Are we just a play-in team? Right, we're going to be 8, 9, 10 seed. Are we going to miss? They're probably going to miss the playoffs this year. They're playing completely. It's extremely likely that happens. And even if they make it, how far are they going to go? They're not beating Boston. They're not beating the Bucks. They're not beating Philly. So where do we go from here? I'm worried about them significantly. I probably could have put them in nothing. I put them in bad. I really did not like the contract. Shout out to Immanuel Quickley. Can't blame him for getting his money at all. All right, now on to the 4 other teams in the bad category that I did not put a maybe nothing next to. I simply just put bad. I left it at that. First of those teams is the Utah Jazz. Obviously, the biggest rumor in the offseason was the Lauri Markkanen stuff. They added Drew Eubanks, who I thought not bad at all. They added, obviously, Isaiah Collier and Filipowski from the draft. Patty Mills, don't think he's going to be an amazing player for them, but it's always good to get veterans in the locker room, especially with the young team. Main guy, Cody Williams from the draft. That was a great draft pick. I really did like the draft overall, to be honest. And then they decided to go with Lauri Markkanen on the re-signing rather than signing trade. That is the main thing I dislike. I do not like that. I think, very similar to the Raptors, they're at a stage where they're very clearly stuck in mediocrity. The best situation for them is to make it to the play-in. Where do they go after that? They're not beating a Minnesota. They're not beating a OKC, a Denver. It's extremely similar to Toronto. They could have traded Lauri Markkanen and made it quite clear, you know what, we're rebuilding. We are ready to do that. Instead, they signed Lauri Markkanen instead of doing a sign and trade with a desperate team like, say, the Warriors, where, yeah, maybe they didn't get the best package, but they start the rebuild. And they're looking at future draft picks added from the Warriors, who I don't think are going to be good for much longer. The draft picks are going to be valuable here soon. And you're also going to be bad yourself, meaning your own draft picks are also going to be extremely helpful. They also got a bunch of Wolves picks from the Rudy Gobert trade. So are they trying to be competitive or are they trying to rebuild? Because I think you need to be one of both unless you're stuck in a bind. They are not stuck in a bind. They could have made the decision right now, a couple weeks, about a month or two ago, August 7th, 2024 is when they resigned him. They could have made the decision, we're moving on. We are fully prepared to move on, and we are ready to rebuild. We know it's going to be tough. We know it's going to suck. There's a lot of up-and-coming big prospects. Obviously, it'd be tough to get a guy like Cooper Flagg. I don't even know if the Jazz have their draft pick next year. I would assume they do. But, I mean, where do they go? Where do they go from here? I really don't. I don't understand it personally. I would have seriously considered putting them in good if they traded Lauri Markkanen away. I'm dead serious. Because they would have finally committed to rebuilding. Their hope, I guess, is that these 3 draft picks are good enough to boost them to the next level. That's the only thing I can see. As for losses, Darius Bazley, Chris Dunn, Talon Horton-Tucker, the big names, Kira Lewis Jr., Omer Yurtseven, Kenny Lofton. Nothing too major outside of Talon Horton-Tucker played pretty regular minutes for them. Chris Dunn, I think, same story there. But yeah, I didn't like it. I think they could have committed to rebuilding, and that's personally where I would have gone with it. Now, moving on to a team that quite clearly had a pretty tough offseason, and that is the LA Clippers. Not necessarily just from a player basis. Like, I don't think the players they brought in were awful. It's more so how the Paul George situation went. Paul George very clearly would have liked to stay in LA. He was more than willing to return to the Clippers if they gave him a fair offer. And it didn't seem like they did that. From what he said on his podcast, the contract negotiations were not great. They lowballed him pretty bad. And then they loved, as he said, they loved to say that Kawhi and him were equals. They were seen as equals. And he said, okay, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to debate if I'm better, if I'm worse. If we're equal, pay me the same money. They said no. That's a bad look. That is a bad look, especially for a team that's going into, a new stadium going into this year. They want as much publicity and fame, and they want to be good. They want to be good in this new arena and attract fans, a bunch of new fans maybe, who are excited to go to an arena that isn't the Staples Center or Crypto.com. So I didn't like that just from the get-go. Now, let's look at what actually happened in the offseason. The biggest loss, obviously, Paul George, Mason Plumlee, Daniel Tice, Russell Westbrook. That is a pretty significant portion of what was a playoff team. Just plain and simple. That is a pretty significant portion of a playoff team. As for who they added, Mo Bamba, Batum, Chris Dunn, Derek Jones, and Kevin Porter Jr. They drafted Cam Christie. Which side sounds better to you? The side that they lost? We're looking at Paul George, Mason Plumlee, Daniel Tice, Russell Westbrook, or the other guys I just mentioned? That on its own, I don't like it. They re-signed James Harden. Fair enough, James. He took his pay cut and then got his money now. This time, also re-signed Zubac. I think he's going to be an awesome player. And re-signed Kai Jones. I didn't like the offseason. It's just plain and simple. The main reason why is that Paul George decision and how that all went. If they lost him on fair terms, I couldn't really blame him. But if he was asking for too much money, couldn't blame him. It was a simple situation. Could have gotten done. Maybe they made a promise to James Harden, like, we'll pay you money, so that's why they couldn't pay Paul George. But I feel like if this team was healthy, they could have been elite. We saw it in 2021. I know it's a long time ago now, but, I mean, they made it to Western Conference Finals, and I believe Kawhi was hurt during that? I mean, like, seriously, this team was really good, and I think they can be good. They went on a crazy streak after they figured out what to do with James Harden once he kind of acclimatized to what was going on there. So I just didn't like it. I feel like they should have offered Paul George a fair amount of money, and I think they would have been looking at another nice playoff season, potentially a conference finals run or an NBA finals run if everything went well. Obviously, it did not. That's why they're in the bad group. Next up, or I guess the next two teams, I should say, are going to be quite controversial. Once again, I'll explain why, and you guys are more than welcome to disagree in the comments. I am happy to hear everybody's opinions. I have the Denver Nuggets on a bad offseason. As for who they lost, biggest guy, of course, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They also lost Justin Holiday, who did play pretty real minutes for them. They also lost Reggie Jackson. That is basically their entire guard room outside of Jamal Murray and Christian Brown. That's tough, just from the get-go. Now, they added Deron Holmes in the draft. They added Dario Saric. They added Russell Westbrook. And then they also re-signed DeAndre Jordan and Jamal Murray. Again, pretty similar story to the Clippers. Like, what is better? Is it better to have Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric? And I'll explain the Russell Westbrook move in a little bit. Or is it better to have Reggie Jackson, Justin Holiday, and KCP? Especially KCP with Jokic. I personally like what they lost better than what they gained. Hence why I put them in the bad group. Westbrook is going to be a polarizing signing. He could turn out to be awesome, be a perfect fit with this team. But it's also just as likely that it's awful. And he doesn't mesh with Jokic. And he can't shoot around Jokic, which is what Jokic needs to succeed. Or a backdoor cutter like Aaron Gordon, who also can shoot on his own. So what exactly does he bring? He'll bring some defensive energy, right? A guy off the bench who can come out, maybe take over the offense while Jokic is out for, 5-6 minutes in the half. Other than that, I don't see what he brings. He probably is not going to play with Jokic on the court, similar to why we struggled to see him and LeBron on the court at the same time. He can't shoot as well as Jokic would like around him, and they pretty much have the energy guy. Obviously, Russ Westbrook is better than this man. They already had the energy guy in Christian Brown. Like I said, Russell Westbrook is better than him. I just don't see. I do not see the addition and how it's going to work. I don't see the vision, I should say. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, they're going to be a phenomenal team. You have the MVP in Jokic. It's not even going to be a debate. They'll probably be a top 4 team if specifically if Jokic stays healthy. But if Jokic and Jamal Murray stay healthy, they're a top 4 team out West. It pretty well isn't debatable. So we'll leave it at that. I don't really have much more else to say. You guys can disagree with me. I'm okay with that. Just let me know in the comments what you think. But for me, that loss to KCP was pretty significant, and I didn't really like what they added either. The other team that I think you guys might also disagree with me on is the Dallas Mavericks. Coming off of a finals run, we lost Josh Green, Tim Hardaway, and Derrick Jones. Pretty well all rotation guys. Obviously, Hardaway struggled, as did Josh Green, I believe, in the playoffs, if I'm remembering correctly. Derrick Jones was an awesome piece for them in the postseason and throughout the regular season. Obviously, Luka's going to love him. It's a lob threat. How can you not, if you're Luka, love a lob threat? And then the additions of Spencer Dinwiddie, Quentin Grimes, Najee Marshall, and Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson, we'll see how he works with the Mavericks. Obviously, he's on a pretty significant decline from the player he was. He got injured multiple times a couple years ago and really hasn't been the same player since then. I think he's going to be fine on the Mavericks. I don't think he's going to be awesome. He's a very streaky guy. I don't think the Mavericks need that. I think they need consistency because we saw how streakiness worked out for them in the playoffs when you have guys like PJ Washington who were incredible for a series, and they go to the next series, and it's like they can't hit the broadside of a barn. So it's pretty tough. Re-sign Markieff Morris. That's pretty much their only key re-signing of the offseason. I just simply didn't like it. I don't really know how else to put it. It wasn't awful. It wasn't good. It wasn't fine, I don't think. They lost 3 key guys in their team for Najee Marshall, Quentin Grimes, and Klay Thompson. Spencer Dinwiddie too, I guess. But we saw how he worked out with the Lakers. Could be better with the Mavs, but I don't really see it. I don't really know what they could have done. I think re-signing Derrick Jones, obviously they got him on a prove-it deal, so Derrick Jones probably wanted to go get paid, hence why he left to a team that gave him a contract. But I didn't think the contract Derrick Jones got was even worth what he was anyways. Like, he could have gotten more money than that from a team. So it just surprised me. Coming off of a finals run, they changed up the team pretty significantly. And I do not like that. And you'll see the Celtics offseason and why you don't switch it up when you can, especially when you won the way the Celtics did. But I'll talk about them later. That wraps out the bad group with the Dallas Mavericks. Once again, feel free to let me know what you guys think. This group is the biggest group, and that is the fine group of teams. Again, this one is probably going to be my least debated group because it's just fine. Like, I'm not saying you're bad. I'm not saying you're good. I think people will be more likely to say that some of these teams are in the good category because I was pretty strict on teams that can make the good or elite territory. We have quite a few teams here, starting first off with the Washington Wizards. Obviously, biggest news for them in the offseason was Alex Sarr. They also added Saddiq Bey, Malcolm Brogdon, drafted Bub Carrington, Kaishan George, and Jonas Valanciunas in free agency, or I guess a sign and trade, I believe is what it was. So, I mean, that's a good offseason. Yeah, like, that is solid. I didn't put them in the good group though because of the losses. Tyus Jones and Deni Avdija, those guys are good. Tyus Jones finally got himself out of Washington. That dude is a phenomenal point guard, and he finally got himself out. That's a big loss for the Wizards. That was a guy who could calm down the team and keep them structured in a time where that team was god-awful. So Deni Avdija was amazing in the back half of the season, specifically towards the end of the season, and we got rid of him. We just got rid of him. I think they were worried about paying him. I believe that is the reason why, because I believe he's about to get paid here coming up next offseason or in season this year. So fair enough, I guess. But they could have had a nice little core going around with Deni. Tyus, I think, was a pretty well guaranteed lose. It just hurts the team. I don't think it was a bad decision or the wrong decision, but he's a good player. Saddiq Bey, Malcolm Brogdon, Bub Carrington, Kaishan George, Alex Sarr, Jonas Valanciunas, Kyle Kuzma, Jordan Poole, and then if you kept Deni, I mean, that's a competent rebuilding team. That's what you're looking for. So I put them in fine. I don't think they made a major mistake. I don't think they made a major addition. They just are going to kind of continue the rebuild, hope they can find some pieces here and there as they continue to struggle along. Next up is the team Deni was traded to, and that is the Portland Trail Blazers. Obviously, they added Denny. They also drafted Donovan Clingan. Little worried about their center situation, but I'll explain that in a little bit. That was pretty much it. They signed Devontae Graham. They lost Malcolm Brogdon. Fine. Just a fine offseason. I don't think they were good. Obviously, they're going to be a pretty bad team. I think nobody's going to question that. But I think what they did in the offseason was perfectly fine. Denny was a solid pickup. Clingan, I believe, probably was the right pick for them. Devontae Graham should get some nice minutes for them. But, I mean, this is a nice and quick offseason. As for the Clingan move, I'm a little worried about their center play. Duop Reith, DeAndre Ayton, and Donovan Clingan. That's three centers who all believe will play for them. Three-man center rotation isn't ideal unless you're the Minnesota Timberwolves. So we'll see what comes of it, but I think it's very likely we see maybe Reith or Ayton either gone in the offseason next year. But what's more likely, I think, is that one of them gets traded during this coming season to maybe another young team who's looking for a center, or maybe a competitive team who just needs a center to try to get him over the hump, or a bench guy like Duop Reith or DeAndre Ayton. Real quick, sorry if you're a Blazers fan, that was really fast. Next team I put on fine, but I very significantly thought about putting them on good, and that is the Orlando Magic. They were the ones who ended up getting KCP, which I think was an awesome signing for them, which is why I considered putting them in good. That guy is going to fit perfect in that backcourt. Him and Jalen Suggs, if that's your 1-2, my God, what a defensive backcourt you have in those two. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope brings the shooting that they need. They also drafted Tristan da Silva, great draft pick. They re-signed a couple key guys, Franz Wagner, Jonathan Isaac, Gary Harris, Goga Bitadze. Goga Bitadze probably won't play as much, but if they can't stay healthy, he absolutely will. And he did very solid last year when they couldn't stay healthy. Losses, we're looking at Joe Ingles and Markelle Fultz being probably the biggest losses. Chuma Okeke, also a player who does get minutes for them. So I put them in fine because I think the losses and the gains pretty similar. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, great pickup. If Markelle Fultz could stay healthy, now he's still a free agent, so he could come back, right? Technically speaking, he could come back. That's the downside of doing this while there's still over 2 months left in the offseason. Nearly 2 months left in the offseason. I just think it was fine. Like I said, I definitely thought long and hard to myself about potentially putting them in the good group, but I decided that fine was the better decision, and you'll see why when you see the teams that made the good offseason group. Another team that I believe also made the fine group that you guys might disagree with is the New Orleans Pelicans. Again, could have made the good group. They lost Dyson Daniels, Najee Marshall, Larry Nance, and Jonas Valanciunas, as well as Cody Zeller. They added Daniel Theis, DeJounte Murray, Wes Missy, and that's pretty much it. They also re-signed Matt Ryan, Timberwolves legend. So the reason I put this offseason as fine, when obviously they made a big splash of DeJounte Murray, who I think is going to be great for New Orleans, is because they have no center. They have Daniel Theis, probably going to be their starting center. That doesn't even sound good, just on its own. Daniel Theis being the starting center. Wes Missy could maybe start. He's probably going to be the backup. They drafted him 21st. He cannot shoot. And I think it's super important to have a shooting big around Zion, or maybe not a stretch, but a guy who can stretch the floor next to Zion. He's one of the most efficient players we have ever seen at the rim, and it's not even close. Like he is well clear of almost all NBA players. I don't know if he's first all time in efficiency, but he is very, very high up there. Putting a center who can't stretch the floor, what does that do? What does that do for you? The only way to get the paint open would then be to have Missy come set a screen for Zion. But then what's the point of getting a guy like DeJounte Murray? To bring just to be a catch and shoot guy? You can kind of see where the problems arise from here. Maybe I could have put them in good and just said that I think that the team as a whole doesn't look awesome the way it's structured. But I personally disliked the loss of Jonas Valanciunas. Obviously, Valanciunas isn't, a world-class center or anything, but he is important to this team. He really is. He's an important guy to this team because he allows Zion to get to the paint. He stretches the floor. He can pick and pop. He can pick and roll. He's a great rebounder. I think it was a big loss. And then obviously just some minor losses in there with guys like Dyson Daniels, Najee Marshall, and Larry Nance led me to put them just in a fine offseason, despite, I think, a great move in getting DeJounte Murray, who was really not as expensive as I thought he was going to be. Next up on the fine list is my favorite team, and that is the Minnesota Timberwolves. Lost Kyle Anderson, Jordan McLaughlin, Monte Morris. That's it for the significant guys. They also lost Wendell Moore and TJ Warren, but those guys didn't really touch the floor all that much. Added Rob Dillingham from the draft, Joe Ingles, and Terrence Shannon. They also re-signed Luka Garza. I did debate putting them in the nothing group, but since they lost pieces, rather than just adding guys through the draft, I feel like some of the teams, they added guys through the draft and that was it. I felt like the Timberwolves filled holes that they lost by adding guys through the draft, hence why I put them in fine rather than a team that did nothing. The loss of Kyle Anderson, they immediately replaced with Joe Ingles. Obviously, he's not as good of a defender or playmaker as Kyle Anderson is, but he's going to stretch the floor. I think the Timberwolves are going to like that, and he's also a great veteran presence to have around. Timberwolves really don't have a backup point guard. Jordan McLaughlin and Monte Morris, that pretty much was the two options for Finch if you wanted to run a true point guard, because most of the time he ran Nickeil Alexander-Walker as the backup point guard, which I think he should be playing as a catch-and-shoot 3-and-D type of player who also has the advantage of he can bring the ball up the court if needed. So they filled those holes that they lost or didn't really have with Terrence Shannon and Rob Dillingham. Dillingham is going to be awesome. The Wolves are going to have two incredible six-man type players on the bench. Rob Dillingham is ready to come into any NBA team right now and be a six-man. He is going to be extremely streaky, and I hope Timberwolves fans are aware of that. He is going to have games where he shoots things that we saw with Jaylen Nowell, right? 3 for 13, right? 3 for 14. But he's also going to have nights where he does what Naz Reid does and comes out, drops 21 on ridiculous efficiency, like 8 for 10, and you move on, and he hits 3 threes. You know, like all these things are possible, and that's how polarizing a six-man can be. And I think it was a great idea to pair a guy who is a great six-man scorer, which is what the Wolves need right now. They need bench scoring, who also can develop into that starting point guard guy once Mike Conley eventually retires here in the next couple seasons. Mike Conley is going to, I think, make him just significantly better than if he went to where he was originally. We originally thought he was going to the Spurs, because the Spurs had so many guys playing point guard that it was like Dillingham was going to be essentially moved to just a scorer, right? With a guy like Stephon Castle and Chris Paul there, he wasn't really going to play point guard, right? He was probably going to be a scorer. So I think it's great that he's going to be able to come to a team where they're going to take advantage of his skill set while also developing him into a all-around player. Terrence Shannon Jr., I really don't know how much he's going to play, especially after the Joe Ingles signing. I think it's a great pickup, though. He's going to be a phenomenal 3-and-D guy in the future. Already had a great start to his season, really, with that summer league that he had, especially those first couple games. But yeah, nice and simple for the Timberwolves. Hopefully that makes sense as to why I put them in the fine group rather than in the nothing group. Next up is the Milwaukee Bucks. I thought the Gary Trent Jr. move was awesome for them to wrap out their free agency, as it seems so far, obviously. But yeah, they added Taurean Prince, they added Gary Trent. That's pretty much it. They also added DeLon Wright, but don't know how much he's going to play. Lost Jay Crowder, Pat Bev, Malik Beasley. That's why they're in fine. It really is that simple. They didn't re-sign anybody. They just lost a couple guys and added a couple guys. That's the definition of a team in fine. Gary Trent Jr., as I mentioned way earlier in the episode, I think was a great pickup for them. Love the idea of getting another guy that can either come off the bench or start, who's catch and shoot. It just fits the Bucks really well. I think it's important that they have good guard play around their guys like Giannis. So pretty simple, nice and quick offseason for them. Nothing crazy, nothing bad. Hence why they're in fine. Next up is the Miami Heat. Similar story here. Losses and gains, pretty similar. So we added Alec Burks, Khalil Ware from the draft. That's about it. We also re-signed Bam Adebayo, Thomas Bryant, Kevin Love, Haywood Highsmith. That's the main reason why I put them in fine and not bad, because they kept a lot of their players who are going to keep them above ground and in that playoff race. They then lost Patty Mills and Caleb Martin. That's pretty much their two biggest guys. You could put DeLon Wright in there, but he didn't really play much with the Miami Heat anyways. Caleb Martin, like I said, obviously the biggest loss, but oh well, like he's not going to make or break your season by losing him. I think Khalil Ware was a great draft pick. It's just a meh offseason. Like if you're a Heat fan, I don't think you're happy about the offseason, but I don't think you're upset about it either. So I put them right smack dab in the middle at just a fine group. Now, almost towards the end of the fine group here, obviously a lot of these teams get quite repetitive, just saying they had meh off seasons, and that is the Chicago Bulls. As I keep saying, it's a very similar story for these teams. They drafted Montes Buzelis, they added Josh Giddey, added Talon Horton Tucker very recently actually. Jalen Smith. Then they re-signed Patrick Williams. That's their main re-signing. They lost Andre Drummond, and then of course the biggest losses are Alex Caruso and DeMar DeRozan. That had me debating putting them in bad, but to be honest, I think they're headed in the right direction. The Bulls management for a while now has been very okay with being mediocre, and I really dislike it. And I'm happy that they finally made the decision to just stop that and just say, you know what, we're gonna be bad. LaVine, come out, ball out. We'll try to trade you, and we'll hit the full reset button. DeMar DeRozan, Alex Caruso, big losses, of course, as I said, but I think they did a good job in the offseason. Josh Giddey is a guy whose value is at an all-time low. Got him from a team who didn't really want him anymore. He's shown that when he's with bad teams, he can put up solid numbers. Might as well get him. Montes Buzelis fell right to them. He is going to be a great pick, I think. Some of the best athleticism in the entire draft. If he finds that three-point shot, he's going to be an elite player in the NBA. Talon Horton Tucker, they're just taking chances on guys. Talon Horton Tucker, Jalen Smith, Kenny Lofton, they're just trying stuff. And I can't blame them. They're a rebuilding team. They're clearly not going to be competitive. Sure, maybe they'll be the 10 seed if things go well. Highly doubt it. I have them probably missing the playoffs here. But it's good. It's a good start. Get that rebuild up and going. Hopefully you can trade LaVine in season, or I believe does his contract end this year? His contract might end this year. Hopefully you can trade him away and you fully reset. So I put them in fine, but to be honest, it wasn't a great offseason. Nets. This is the definition of just an okay offseason. Similar story to most of these teams. They lost a couple guys, but I'm glad that they went in the direction that they did. Obviously, Mikal Bridges' biggest name. It's not even close as to who they lost. Lonnie Walker also just went recently as well. They added Bojan Bogdanovic, Shake Milton, and Zaire Williams. They re-signed Nick Claxton, Trenton Wofford. So, again, it's just a Met offseason. I'm sorry this is getting so repetitive, but they made the right moves. They fully committed to rebuilding. They stopped trying, thinking that Mikal was going to be the future. They got some guys that are potentially going to have decent trade value, and a guy like Cam Thomas, who, do you really want him as the number one option on your team? Probably not. The same way you probably wouldn't want, Rob Dillingham or Naz Reid, right, 6-man scoring type players as your number one option, but they're awesome to have. So I really can't blame them. Hopefully they trade some of these guys away at their peak value, because they should get some guys putting up career numbers this season. Nick Claxton could be one of those guys as well. We'll see how it goes. First true year of the rebuild, I should say, because it feels like been rebuilding for a couple years ever since KD and Kyrie went off in the trade deadline a couple years ago. So we'll see how it goes. Get that rebuild up and going, and we'll talk again probably towards the end of the season about what they can do. Next up is the definition of a meh team every single year, and that is the Atlanta Hawks. They lost Saddiq Bey and of course DeJounte Murray as well. That is the two main guys. Wesley Matthews also could be on there. And then they added Dyson Daniels, Larry Nance, number one overall pick, Zachary Richeche, Cody Zeller. Didn't really re-sign anyone too important outside of Vic Krejci. So, again, they lost some key pieces, but I put them in fine rather than bad after losing DeJounte Murray, because I think it was the right decision. It's tough. It's tough to have a team that looks so good on paper, or I guess just a backcourt that looks so good on paper, and then have to sit there and go, we have to get rid of you. And it's probably going to make us better to do it. They made the right draft pick in Richeche. I would have liked them to pick Alex Sarr, but since they're going to keep Clint Capella, fair enough, I guess. But Richeche is going to be a good player in the future. I don't like him for this season because I think he's very similar to Jalen Johnson, and Jalen Johnson is going to play significantly more than Richeche probably will as long as he stays healthy. Trae Young loves Jalen Johnson. It's gonna all bode well there. I'm happy they went in the direction of not sticking with just being meh and being okay and trying to go, okay, are we going to be bad? Are we going to be good? They're going to try to be good with Trae Young. If that doesn't work out, I believe they're more than open to moving him if they're ready to rebuild as things like that come along. Finally, we have the last team in the fine group. Another team I debated putting in the good group, and that is the Boston Celtics. I debated putting them in good because they did exactly what you would want a champion to do, and that is they simply kept everybody. They just got Lonnie Walker a few days ago. They re-signed Jason Tatum. They re-signed Derek White. They re-signed Luke Cornett. They re-signed Sam Hauser. They added Lonnie Walker just a couple days ago. I think the draft pick was the right pick, going with Baylor Shireman. It's real simple. I mean, they made the right decisions. They're probably going to be in the conference finals at worst again next year. This team is loaded for a couple years, at least in the East. We could be looking at a team that wins multiple championships over the course of 3, 4, or 5 years. So, shout out to the Celtics. I debated putting them in good, but they didn't make a splash move where I think they would be with some of these teams that I have in the good rankings. And that is it for the fine group. We now move on to the good group, who has 8 teams, and then there's 3 teams that I have in the elite group. So, just 11 teams to go to wrap us out. First up on the good list is the San Antonio Spurs. Obviously, biggest move for them in the offseason, probably their draft picks, but also Chris Paul. They added Harrison Barnes, Stephon Castle, and then, of course, Chris Paul, like I just mentioned. The only key losses were Devontae Graham and Cedi Osman. So, nothing significant there. I love the veteran moves that they made. Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul are guys that I think they're aware, maybe another championship is kind of out of the realm of possibility for them, or in Chris Paul's case, a championship is out of the realm of possibility for him. And they're ready to just help promote that next class of NBA stars. And that, of course, starts with Victor Wembanyama. I think him and Chris Paul are going to be phenomenal together. I also like the Chris Paul pickup because of their draft pick at 4, Stephon Castle, as we mentioned earlier. Chris Paul, I think, is going to foster him into a tremendous point guard in this league. If he gets shooting, Stephon Castle is going to be elite. Like, it really is that simple. He struggled, I believe it was like 27% at UConn. If he finds shooting, I mean, him and Victor Wembanyama are a scary duo. Seriously, you have a young duo. Not going to be expensive for a couple years. Wemby is going to get a stupid contract when he gets to that point. But you're going to have, until Wemby needs to get paid 4 years of Stephon Castle and Victor Wembanyama. Probably a year or 2 of Chris Paul and Victor Wembanyama, more likely 1. This team looks good. This team looks like they can make some serious strides coming this season. Love the veteran presence. Love that they didn't lose anybody too important. Obviously, you have a phenomenal coach in Greg Popovich. This team is on the up and up. We'll see if they can add some pieces or maybe move some guys later on in this rebuild to really solidify that Victor Wembanyama has a clear second option and make them a playoff team, because I really like the direction they're heading right now. We'll see what they do. But yeah, pretty comfortably in the good group. Next up in the good group is the Sacramento Kings. Of course, they added DeMar DeRozan. That is the number 1 move in their offseason. They also, as we mentioned way earlier in the video, added Jalen McDaniels, also got Jordan McLaughlin, also added Devin Carter from the draft, who probably isn't going to play at all this year, but I think it was a good 3-and-D draft pick. To get overall, they lost Harrison Barnes, JaVale McGee, Davion Mitchell in that Jalen McDaniels trade. That's pretty well it. They also re-signed Alex Len and the big boy, Malik Monk. That is the big guy that they added, or not added, but returned back to the team. Great decision there. He works phenomenally with this Kings team. We've seen him struggle in Charlotte and in LA, and he went to Sacramento, and everything just clicked for him. So I'm glad for their sake that they kept him. As for their actual season this year, I'm a little worried about the defensive side of the ball. Now, Jalen McDaniels could maybe help some of that, but adding DeMar DeRozan, not exactly a phenomenal defensive player, is he? So we're looking at a starting lineup of DeMar DeRozan, Kevin Huerter maybe, obviously De'Aaron Fox, Sabonis. You have a rebounding in there, but not too much defense. We'll see how it goes. I liked the offseason personally. I don't think they're going to be an elite team out west. I don't think they're going to be the 3 seed like we saw them be just 2 years ago. I think we're looking at best a 5-6 seed, but more likely a high play-in team. So, as always with all these teams, we'll see how it goes. But I like the move to get DeMar DeRozan. Don't know how it's going to work out, but on paper, it does look quite nice. Next up is a team that I was very surprised had a good offseason given the circumstances they were in, and that is the Phoenix Suns. I was really proud of what they did in this offseason. We lost Drew Eubanks, Eric Gordon, Nasir Little. That's pretty much it for guys who played, and we added a couple guards in Tyus Jones, Monte Morris. We also added Mason Plumlee, backup center, since we did lose Drew Eubanks. I like this. I like this a lot. Their biggest problem was the guard play last season. Bradley Beal obviously didn't play a lot throughout the season, but he pretty clearly didn't seem like he wanted to play point guard or wasn't very good at it. And I saw people talking about this. I think it's very realistic that Bradley Beal comes off the bench. Start Tyus Jones with Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, maybe Royce O'Neal, guys like that. And who's their center right now? I'm forgetting his name. Nurkic. Start that five. Come off the bench with Monte Morris, Bradley Beal, and maybe even Bol if he gets minutes. Josh Okogie. This team looks all right. This team looks like they could be competent. All they need is a point guard to direct this offense and make sure that Booker and Durant are getting the most efficient and the best touches they possibly can. I think it's going to be tough to put a guy like Bradley Beal on the bench, and I think it's very unlikely that it does happen. However, I wouldn't be shocked if it happens, and I actually would like it if it does, because then it helps Tyus Jones and Monte Morris not be on the same bench group, where now we have 2 point guards coming off the bench, and one of these guys just simply isn't going to play, probably Monte Morris, who's a perfectly competent backup point guard. So, really, really, really well done from the Suns. They didn't have much money to work with because of the 3 guys that they have on their team. They kept the core together. They didn't trade anybody, right? They didn't freak out and panic and trade, Booker or Durant or anything like that. They got the guard play they needed. I'm really excited for their future this season. I think they're looking at getting out of the play-in and boosting themselves to that 5-6 seed, just like they did last year. Next up is the Indiana Pacers. I think their biggest move probably re-signing a couple of their guys. They re-signed Andrew Nembhard. They re-signed Pascal Siakam. They re-signed TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin. That's basically their entire core who just made it to the conference finals last year, immediately back in the swing of things. They didn't really add anybody. James Wiseman, about the only name. They didn't lose anybody. So I liked the re-signings. They didn't lose any major pieces. They're going to be running it back with pretty much the same squad, which is, I wish, what Atlanta did a couple years ago when they made that conference finals miracle run. Don't switch it up. Don't go all in when you don't have to. Clearly, the Siakam and Halliburton minutes were phenomenal in the playoffs. End of story. Nembhard looks phenomenal. He looks like he is going to be a great player next to Tyrese Halliburton. And if Tyrese Halliburton has injury problems like he did last year, he could be an extremely competent starting guard in this league. He was incredible in the playoffs, all the way throughout the playoffs, to be honest. TJ McConnell, phenomenal bench guy. Obi Toppin, perfect guy to pair next to Halliburton. The Pacers look great for the season. I'm excited for them. Don't know if it's going to be a conference finals run with how good a couple of the other teams have gotten out east, but it does look like a very, very solid team on paper. This team I honestly thought had a bad offseason until I really looked in depth at it, and that is actually the Golden State Warriors. I was really worried that they were not having a good offseason. And then I kind of looked at it and I was like, wow, I like this. So we lost Chris Paul, we lost Dario Saric, and of course we lost Klay Thompson. Now, Klay Thompson wasn't too valuable to them last season, but they added Kyle Anderson, basically backup Draymond Green. Going to fit, I think, great with that team. Obviously, the lack of shooting, maybe a little bit of a worry, but oh well, add some defense. Great add in Buddy Hield. And Buddy Hield right now is essentially better Klay Thompson. That's what he is. He is going to bring what Klay Thompson brought last year, but better. I like it. More efficient shooter. If he gains confidence, my God, can he catch fire quick? I think the Golden State fans are going to love him because he is exactly how Golden State likes to play. That's his play style. De'Anthony Melton, if he can stay healthy, another great pickup there as well. And then, of course, the re-signing of Steph Curry, as they did not too long ago. So, I mean, I like it. I really like this offseason a lot. I was really worried about the Warriors. Now, do I think they're going to, make a huge step and be the 4 or 5 seed? Probably not. Similar to that, the other teams we mentioned, I think they're going to be the battle with the Kings and the Suns for those upper positions, or more likely the play-in positions. But like I said, I was very surprised to see it. Good on the Warriors. Hopefully everything can go well for them. Next up is the worst team in NBA history. Not technically, but the worst losing streak in NBA history, and that is the Detroit Pistons from last year. They lost Evan Fournier, Taj Gibson, Quentin Grimes. I mean, really nobody of note. James Wiseman, I guess. Re-signed Cade Cunningham and Simone Fontecchio, who I think is going to be a good decision in the long run. Fontecchio looked awesome with the Jazz last year before moving to Detroit. But the main reason I like it is the additions. We added shooting. We finally added shooting around Cade Cunningham. Great playmaker. All this guy needs is shooting around him, and he is going to take a massive step up. I like Cade Cunningham to... I don't like when they do this with MIP, right? Guys who are already good. He could potentially be an MIP candidate this year. Seriously. if these shooters can knock down their shots, Cade Cunningham is going to be unstoppable. We added Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., biggest name is probably Tobias Harris. We also drafted Ron Holland. We added Paul Reed. That's a good team. That's a competent team, and I like it a lot, really. I do. They got Tobias Harris, not underpaid, I would say, but less than his value probably is, because I think he's a good player, despite obviously what happened in Philly last year, specifically in the postseason. But he's going to be great, I think, with them. And at the very worst, he brings up his trade value. You trade him, and you walk out of there with extra pieces that you didn't have. Since we signed Tobias Harris and didn't trade for him, we're not losing anything. So anything we trade him for is gain. I think Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway, if they can find their shooting strokes and be less inconsistent and more of a consistent shooter. Now, I'm not expecting them to shoot 40% and anything ridiculous, but if we can shoot mid to upper 30s next to Cade Cunningham, I like that a lot, especially compared to having, one of the Thompson twins next to him who really struggles to shoot. So I like it a lot. I think they did a great job this offseason. They're rebuilding, but they finally made a move in the rebuild. They weren't just like, okay, we'll suck and hope we hit on a draft pick. They very clearly made moves catered around trying to keep Cade Cunningham happy, getting him back, and continuing the rebuild. Overall, good job, Detroit. 2 teams left to go in the good group before we get to the 3 elite teams. And the first one of those 2 teams is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Similar story with it's a lot of re-signings. I'm very happy with the re-signings that they got. Jared Allen, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley. There's your core 3 right there outside of Darius Garland. You got all 3 of them back. This team is running it back. They're hoping that everything can turn out a little bit better than it has. They did lose Marcus Morris and Isaac Okoro. I'm just glad they didn't rebuild. I think this team is solid. They're giving it a shot with a new coach. I can't fault them. I really can't. I like that they kept Donovan Mitchell. I thought that Donovan Mitchell was going to be gone, or Garland. It was going to be one of those 2, and they ended up keeping both of them. So that 4 on paper is going to be really good. We just need him to stay healthy. We need to hopefully see if things can go well with the new coach at the helm. And I think this team could turn out to be really, really solid. I really do think they can be. They were up high in the Eastern Conference just a year ago. They've been up high in the Eastern Conference for a long time. So, hopefully we can see the same from them coming this season. Nothing much more than that. Next up, and the final team in the good group is the Charlotte Hornets. Weird seeing them in a group this good when you look at their team, but they did a good job this offseason. I really do think so. Really no losses. Poku, maybe the biggest name that they lost. Bertans, they didn't really lose anybody. The addition of Josh Green specifically, I should say, I think is going to be great. You're getting yourself an MVP candidate, and at the worst, nice trade bait. I love it. They added Tijan Salan from the draft. Definitely a little bit of a reach. They could have got him later in the draft. I will be honest about that. But he's a young prospect. Fair enough. They clearly liked him. If you watch their little mini docu-series, they clearly liked him more than anybody else who was available in the draft in that time. Super young kid, so he's got a long time to develop. They re-signed Miles Bridges. They re-signed Seth Curry. They're not going to be good. If LaMelo Ball can stay healthy, we're looking at a playing team. But I think they did a good job in keeping the core together. They didn't blow it up. So guys like Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball kind of go, well, what? Why? They kept it together. They're trying to be competitive while rebuilding at the same time, and they're not stuck in mediocrity. There's a difference between a team like this, who is clearly a struggling rebuilding team, that's trying to be good while they're rebuilding, and a team like the Bulls, who clearly need to rebuild, but refuse to. And so they both end up in similar positions where we're around the play-in, but one of those teams has significantly more upside for the future than the other. So good on the Charlotte Hornets. Good offseason for you. Probably the worst good offseason if I had to rank all these teams, but I still think they deserve to be better than just the fine group. And we finally made it to the elite group, 55 minutes in, just before 55 minutes. We've made it to the 3 teams that I have in the elite group. I'm sure you can probably guess them by now because you haven't heard their names. You're going through them in your head to figure out who hasn't been said yet. Starting first with one of these 3 teams, and that is the Philadelphia 76ers. Self-explanatory here. You got rid of Tobias Harris, probably your biggest problem on the team, and you added Paul George. probably the biggest free agent on the market. I could just leave it at that, but I won't. We'll get into a little bit more detail. We lost Tobias Harris. Buddy Hield was good for one game for them. Wasn't really good outside of that. De'Anthony Melton was injury riddled quite often. Got rid of him. Honestly, their biggest loss for me in terms of a guy who really contributed was Paul Reed. But, I mean, they fixed that right away, right? We got Andre Drummond back. There's your backup center. We got Paul George, obviously. We got Eric Gordon. We got Reggie Jackson. We got Caleb Martin. We drafted Jared McCain. We just got Yabu Sele, who had a phenomenal Olympics. We're looking good. We re-signed Kyle Lowry. We re-signed Tyrese Maxey. We re-signed Kelly Oubre. This team is scary good. This team is going to be up top of the East. It's. I don't even think it's a debate. This team could very... now, let me chill. I don't think they're going to be better than the Celtics. If Embiid is healthy, though, this team could be the 2 seed. Seriously. They could absolutely be the 2 seed out East. This team could be better than the Bucks. This team could be better than the Knicks. This team could be better than the Heat. Anybody out East who might have a phenomenal season. I don't know much more to say than that. They made all the right additions. They got rid of pretty much any player who had any sort of minor problem for their team. De'Anthony Melton couldn't stay healthy. Buddy Hield wasn't good. Tobias Harris was like a stain, and the fans didn't like him. Batum, Bamba, those aren't big losses. And they replaced them all with competent NBA guys, the biggest free agent on the market. How can that not be an elite offseason? How can it not? I love the direction they're going. Philly, you might be seeing yourselves in the conference finals come, what would that be, May? June? I can't remember now. Next up, the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is how you work with what you've got. They clearly chose not to go out and get another star. They were not trying to go steal Durant off of, Phoenix. They were willing to sit back and add the right role player pieces that they needed for their team, and they did just that. Got rid of Gordon Hayward. Obviously, that was a little bit ugly when he came out, and it was like, I think it was his wife actually talking bad about OKC. Got rid of Josh Giddey. I mean, he was their worst player on the playoff roster. Just simply was. He was almost unplayable. And you got rid of him. You added one of the best defenders, not even 3-and-D, just one of the best defenders in the entire NBA. And Alex Caruso, he probably will make an all-defensive team, playing on a team with much more notoriety in the Oklahoma City Thunder. You added Isaiah Hartenstein. That's a great backup center to get. He was phenomenal in the postseason last year for a Knicks team who had almost nobody who could play the center position at all. And then you also re-signed Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins. I mean, that's elite. For a team that wasn't going to go out there and get a star, this is as good of an offseason as you can have. Similar to Philadelphia, they got rid of the players that had a problem for their team, and they added the exact holes that needed to be fixed. Alex Caruso is going to make this team terrifying. Him and Lou Dort might be on the court at the same time. You have two of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. You might have Isaiah Hartenstein and him on the court at the same time on the bench. Your bench might have Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein. That is incredible. This team is going to be terrifyingly good. I think they have a very legit chance to make it out of the West. That was their first postseason with this new core last season. They only had a play-in game, right, a couple years ago against the Wolves, and the Wolves beat them, and that was that. Well, I guess they played the Pelicans before that too. But they didn't really have any postseason experience. They came out, dominated their first round series, and then they played a team who went to the finals in their second round series, and it wasn't like they got blown out. I believe they lost in 6, if I'm remembering correctly, but it wasn't a blowout. It wasn't like, okay, we win by 20, they win by 20. Every game was a close game. They were in every single game. They were very close to making it to the conference finals, having a chance at the NBA finals. These are the moves that I think will help get them over the edge. I think it is extremely likely that we are looking at the Thunder as one of the 2 teams in the conference finals next season. And the final team, who could be joining that maybe in the finals completely if they can knock off the Boston Celtics, is the New York Knicks. Oh my goodness. If you're a Knicks fan, this is the dream offseason. You got the Nova Knicks together by getting Mikal Bridges. And then in that, you also re-sign OG Anunoby, re-sign Precious Achiuwa, and somehow Jalen Brunson takes nearly, I believe, over $100 million pay cut to stay with your team and allow guys like OG to stay with the team and get their payday. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This team, the starting lineup is what? Brunson, McCall, OG, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson. Are you kidding me with that starting five? You still have Josh Hart off the bench. You still have, I mean, even if he even plays, Cameron Payne off the bench, Dante DiVincenzo off the bench, Precious Achiuwa off the bench. What more can you ask for if you're a Knicks fan? It doesn't even need to be that much. Like you can't ask for more. I don't even need to explain the depth of the team. If I just said the starting five, because you know Tibbs, he's going to play starters majority of the game. You also got an Iron Man. Mikal Bridges plays every game, every year. He hasn't missed an NBA game. They could not have found a more perfect fit for this team. The team chemistry is already there. It's just about if they can work now. If this team can work out in the NBA, this team not only could rival the Celtics in the regular season, it's extremely likely that this team could beat the Celtics come playoff time. I'm not saying they'd be favored to do so. I'm not saying I wouldn't pick the Celtics, but the Knicks are terrifying. And I think it's going to be a big battle between them and Philly out east for that 2 seed and potentially for the 1 seed. If the Celtics maybe have a little championship hangover, now obviously they're not going to be awful, but they may not be, 63 win good like they were last year, at least in the regular season. So maybe the Knicks can fight for the 1 seed. Maybe Philly can fight for the 1 seed. Let me know what you guys think for all these teams, not just the Knicks, not just the Sixers, not just the Celtics. Let me know what you guys think. Once again, I will go through each group real quick. We had 2 teams in nothing, Rockets and Grizzlies. We had 6 teams in bad, Mavs, the Nuggets, the Clippers, the Jazz, the Lakers, and the Raptors. We had, I'm not even going to say the number, it's a lot. In the fine group, the Celtics, the Hawks, the Nets, the Bulls, the Heat, the Bucks, the Wolves, Pelicans, Magic, Blazers, Wizards. And then in the good group, we had Hornets, Cavs, Pistons, Warriors, Pacers, Suns, Kings, and Spurs. And our 3 elite teams, the Knicks, the Thunder, and the 76ers. Let me know if there's any teams that you guys agree with. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, if there's any, sorry for that. As I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, if you guys have a favorite athlete, favorite NBA player, drop it down in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching the first episode of this new show. I hope to get this out to you guys a couple times a month. Obviously, it'll be more likely to see me when the season is actually underway and we can really discuss what's going on. I have some topics I would like to discuss just over the course of the offseason. We could be ranking players, right? So positions, point guard, shooting guard, guards, forwards, ranking contenders, right? I can make the same tier list for teams that I think could contend. I'd love to discuss more in depth some of these off-season moves rather than just go team by team. You'll see award predictions as we get closer and closer to the season. There's so much that you guys will see from this show, so be sure to recommend it to a friend. Show them this episode, and let me know what you guys thought of this episode down in the comments below. I'll see you guys soon for the second episode of Around the World. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you then.